This is the Average Guy Network, and you have found Cyber Frontiers, show number 4, recorded on June 13th, 2014. Here on Cyber Frontiers, we explore cybersecurity, big data, and the technology shaping the future through an academic perspective. I'm your host, Jim Collison, broadcasting live from the Average Guy.TV studios here in Bellevue, Nebraska. And, of course, we have Christian Johnson now, post his freshman year, student at the University of Maryland, there at College Park. Never on schedule, but always up to date. We post the show and the show notes out at the AverageGuy.tv. If you have questions, comments, or contributions, maybe you're watching the recorded version of this and you'd like to get a question into us, something strikes a question that you might have during the show, send those to my email, jim@theaverageguy.tv. You can also find me on Twitter at jcollison. And now call in those questions, 402-478-8450. If you're driving, don't try and write that down, but stop, 402-478-8450, and we'll play those questions right here on the program. All right, we're here today, number 4. Christian, it has taken us 2 months to get from 3 to 4, but welcome back. Great to see you.
Yeah, great to be back. Hoping to shorten that down, obviously, this summer and get some regular shows and production out there for everyone. So finals, obviously, and the wind down of freshman year was that vacuum of 2 months. And right now I'm working at Gallup with you and doing some stuff over there, as well as over here at where I'm sitting right now at Mid-Atlantic Crossroads, doing the networking and high-performance compute work for them. So it's actually great to be back in that environment, and I'm enjoying my time. So looking forward to getting on that regular cycle. So
yeah, good to have you back. I think you and I talked about every other Friday, and we're just gonna kind of plan it, and if we have to move it, we will. But that'll kind of be just a regular schedule for us every other Friday through the summer to try and get those up to speed. So watch for some more Cyber Frontiers as they come out this summer. I'd like to get on a regular schedule, just makes it a lot easier for me. And then joining us tonight, a guy that's been around the Home Server Show community. So if you know anything about me and these podcasts, you know we started over at homeservershow.com with Dave McCabe, and he's been around a long time. And lurking, I think, is the word I use, but Mark Goldstein. Mark, how are you this evening?
Good evening, gentlemen. How you doing?
We are doing well. Mark, you earlier in the pre-show, you told me you're a VP of Business Development at Insider Spyder. Just tell us a little bit about what you do, how long you've been there, those kinds of things.
Sure. Okay. So I'll give a little bit of background here. And I guess we'll go back to where I got engaged in cybersecurity and privacy issues, if that's all right with you.
Sure, yeah.
Sure, okay. So let's go back to 1999. At that time, I was just starting working at America Online, providing you guys with that great dial-up service.
Woohoo!
Yeah, and as I was starting at AOL, my family became the target of medical ID theft. And now, this is in the days way before people were talking about data breaches like every day of the front page of the newspaper. This was something rather rare. But a medical ID breach is pretty significant because, look, if someone steals your money, usually Visa, MasterCard, your bank will make it up to you. But if someone steals your DNA, it's gone. If someone steals information about a medical condition, it's gone. So when that happened, I became very interested in what was the consequences of this? How were people prosecuted? How do people like the average guy protect themselves from these threats of medical ID, financial ID theft, any kind of identification theft that could occur? So I worked for quite a few years at AOL. I guess sort of my claim to fame at AOL was I was doing some work trying to find out why we were having a significant problem with cancellations. Ended up visiting 20 customers, and these were actually former customers, as we were going through and with my lab manager looking at their computers. Every one of them had malware, and every one of them thought that America Online was the cause of their problem. And so I came back from that trip, wrote the Malware Manifesto, and that became AOL's safety and security program. And that really was the start of that. It was around 2004, 2005. I worked in AOL's privacy department. I worked at cybersecurity work. A few years ago, I went out on my own, started a cybersecurity, privacy, and IT consulting business called Safe, Secure, Private. Try to get all three issues in there. It's a long name, but it was quite a lot of fun doing that. And along the way, I'm a advisor to a group called the Online Trust Alliance. And their issue or their concern is that the internet's based on trust, right? You open up an email, do you really know it's from Citibank? You go to a website, do you really know that it's your bank's website? The whole issue of things like DNS and SSL. Of course, we now look at Heartbleed as an example. There's a lot of trust mechanisms that are not available in the internet. Even look at things like your browser, which we're going to talk about in a bit. So I spent some time. In fact, I still am an advisor for the Online Trust Alliance. And now recently I've joined this Insider Spyder, which is looking at the emerging issue of insider threats, which, by the way, is not just Edward Snowden, right? I mean, everyone knows Snowden, but I was talking to a guy yesterday who used to be the CIO of the city of San Francisco, and he told me the story about one of his employees who hijacked, it actually was an IT employee, who hijacked all of the servers in the city of San Francisco so that no one could get their password changed. No one could, there was no modifications, and so it's quite a story, but it just goes to show that that insider threats can be someone stealing information, it could be someone doing malicious activity. It's unfortunately a rising problem. And I guess last, Christian and I the other night got together at a group called the Mach 37, MACH 37, which is a cybersecurity incubator in Northern Virginia, which is where I'm located. Mach 37 helps startup cybersecurity companies build their products, get out in the marketplace. And so Christian and I got a chance to meet with some of the people who've got some interesting ideas and things like IPv6, right? How do you secure yourself? We're all moving to IPv6. How are we going to be secure when we get to that instead of IPv4? Things like sensors in the network that are focused, or I should say, that are based on biological mechanisms as the basis of their thoughts. So that brings us up to where I'm at today, and look forward to talking about some privacy and cyber security issues.
No, very cool. Great to have you with us. Christian, let me throw it back to you with Mach 37. I know that's just a real recent event that you went to. Let's start there and kind of talk through what did you see, your interest in it. You're coming at it with a kind of a fresh pair of eyes, so to speak, from cybersecurity. Walk me through that a little bit.
Sure. So for me, it's a little bit different because everyone in the room is pretty senior in the field, doing their own entrepreneurial startups, and really it's like a quiet echo in the room in terms of academia representation. So I was the only kind of university presence, and of course I was from Maryland, so that was just awkward in and of itself, considering this discussed sort of competition between Maryland and Virginia, which we all keep quiet. But so in any case, there was really exciting to see some of the conversations. I think we had a gentleman. The guest speaker was from BAE. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly. British Aerospace.
Yeah, and we had a really good conversation. So obviously, besides the companies just kind of giving their pitch and doing all the networking and learning about what they're getting at, we had a really good conversation around things like where do we actually get validated and strong data sets for cybersecurity, and that's been a real problem for many research institutions to actually be able to publish research papers that you can have someone, it's reproducibility of work is one of the #1 ratings that gets applied to graduate level work at a university, right? So when we are doing this in cybersecurity and these folks are standing up during these conferences and saying, well, why can't I reproduce this? Well, when everyone says, well, it's because you're not using the same data we were, and we can't give you our data because either it no longer exists or we're under NDA or X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, usually it's the privacy issue, right, Christian? Well, our data is it's our customer data, it's our employee data. We don't want to share it.
Right, and so even if it's anonymized, people are very skittish about it. So it's been a big issue. So interesting to hear talks about that. Also, really about kind of focused on where is the mitigation of some of these threats taking place, and really looking at more of kind of a people aspect. Again, I saw that a lot in the folks who were there, which was interesting considering that these folks are all selling a product which is technical focused and they're doing technology, but very interesting to hear the gentleman from BAE basically say that unless you're analyzing why people are getting into the systems and not the just patching every single possible technology hole that's in your network, you're missing the larger threat that's accessible to you. So interesting ideas. Certainly not the first time I've heard these things, but nice to hear within this type of space where you're looking at startups, venture capital, these companies hopefully getting accelerated to a place where they're ahead of the curve from where other people would be if they weren't a member of this accelerator. And of course, these guys have been in and out of large companies and doing really cool stuff. So Mark mentioned earlier the talks, and just what I learned about IPv6 talking to some of the folks there, really cool to see. So it's kind of a I like the entrepreneurial feel to it, but also having the kind of intellectual conversations is kind of very reminiscent of some of the conversations we have doing research in ACEs and so forth. So very cool event to be at.
Yeah, and in fact, I should mention every Thursday night while the cohort class is in session, there's 2 sessions a year, we have a dinner where we bring in a speaker like the gentleman who is the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer for British Aerospace. So we'll bring in people who are cybersecurity entrepreneurs who will tell their story. Hey, here's where I started, here's how I got funding, here's how I found customers, here's how I grew the company, and all the way to the point where someone came along and said, hey, you got something really cool, and we're a big company, we'd like to buy it from you. And ultimately, if you're an entrepreneur, that's a good thing. So
from their site, so just for those following along in the notes, Mach 37 says they're an incubator, right? For it, Mach 37 is an intensive 90-day program created to launch cyber startups. So why the particular focus in that arena and just not tech startups in general?
Well, because there was a market need, right? Christian is across the river, the Potomac River. He's in Maryland. I'm in Virginia, and this particular area is just a hotbed of cybersecurity innovation. The internet was built here out of the Pentagon and DARPA. So there's a lot of companies, a lot of expertise that's come out of both the government and the enterprises. So there's certainly a lot of tech incubators. I know Jim, you do a program where you bring in some folks from the local area around your home talking about the incubation and startups. So this just the folks who ran it just happen to have expertise in cybersecurity and
Sure.
thought that this was the right thing to do.
Sure, fits in with the area. What's your role then at Mach 37?
So it's a mentor. It's a unpaid position. It's just to help the organizations. My particular forte is in looking at strategy, also doing work in marketing. One of the things about cybersecurity is that often we talk about it in very technical language, and that's great if we're talking among cyber engineers, but ultimately you're talking very often to the CEO of the company, the chief financial officer, the legal officer, and the last thing that they want to know about is, Well, let me tell you about some APT, right? And they go, what's an APT? Oh, Advanced Persistent Threat. Well, what's that mean, right? What they want to know about is how it's going to affect their business, right? Is my production potentially going to be shut down because we have some malware that's on the factory floor? So it's good to be able to communicate, to learn how not only to be very technical and but also to be able to explain things to others in the organization.
And then on the site they say a countdown to S14 demo day. So what's that all about?
Oh yeah, so next week there is at the end of each cohort class, there's an opportunity to have a a venture capital pitch, a VC pitch. We invite in 100, 150 venture capital folks from a lot of them from the Washington D.C. area, but we get people from Silicon Valley, others who, up and down the East Coast, and you do a pitch, right? The pitch is like it's, like the classic elevator pitch where you get on the first floor with someone very important, and you're supposed to be able to tell them all of the important things about you in 35 seconds by the time you get up to the 7th floor. So in this case here, it's a 7-minute pitch where you talk about what problem you're trying to solve, what's unique about your solution, what's the size of the marketplace. It's kind of tough when you've spent weeks and months and years developing some intellectual property, and now you got to do this pitch in 7 minutes. So that's the demo days, and so Jim, everyone gets a chance to get up and talk about what they're doing.
That's kind of like a TED Talk, right? That's
yeah,
like,
it's exactly. Yeah, it's almost like speed dating for venture capitalists.
Yeah, no, right on. Very cool. Christian, anything else you wanted to add on that experience there?
Yeah, no, I think that about covers it. But it's cool to see what types of products are coming out of it. Actually, one of the companies, I don't know if they were in the previous cohort or if they're just a part of the program. CypherPath actually sold one of their new products to our ACES lab, and I was kind of aware of it because I knew these guys were setting it up in the lab and they were telling me about it, but I wasn't really connecting the dots until I was talking to the COO of that company, and they were saying, hey, we sold this thing to you guys at Maryland, and I'm like, maybe it was our program, and sure enough, it's going to be in our ACES lab in the fall. And that's for software-defined networking and doing cybersecurity experiments in a kind of reconfigurable network world where everything is basically a virtual network, and you're just relying on the hardware interfaces to build basically an enterprise into a very virtual space. So it's interesting. Well, it's cool to see that we have that technology coming from companies like that, which are coming out of the accelerator.
And of course, Christian wanted to get all the beta releases sent to him, so they had.
I never said that.
they were actually. I will say this that it was such a shock to the CEO and the COO of CypherPath to meet Christian, because it's like, hey, one of our customers is here. Look, everyone, our customer. So it was
a customer sighting, right?
It was market validation for them, and thanks to Christian.
Yeah, no, that's really good. That's good. I mean, it's I think for the average guy, the average tech guy that listens to Home Gadget Geeks and now listening here to Cyber Frontiers may not be aware of the intense cybersecurity focus that's going on right now, and certainly I wasn't aware. I'll be honest, until Christian mentioned that to me, I had no idea. Being here in Omaha, the intensity, and the more we talk with you guys, the more I realize, man, in the Beltway, it is intense when we talk about cybersecurity, right?
Yeah, and it's funny too, because I think we were talking about it at the event, how it's pretty much like, you have Virginia, DC, and Maryland, and it's like it's on everyone's radar, whether you're in technology or not. And then you trickle up north or you trickle out Midwest, and it's like, yeah, no one really cares. Of course, the exceptions being places like New York City, Silicon Valley, but it's fascinating to see just how much buzz there is about it. Some of it warranted buzz, to be honest. other stuff makes me wonder. But yeah, it's on in the technology realm, especially for DC. It's probably in the top 3 topics, I would say, with pretty confident certainty at this point.
You know, for so many years, I would go to a cocktail party. Oh, I didn't go to many cocktail parties, but when I went to a cocktail party and someone says, "Hey, so what do you do?" and I'd say, "Cybersecurity," and then they go, "Oh, wait, my glass needs to be refreshed. Where's the bar?" and they go run off, you know, and get their drink. And now, when you say, "Yeah, I do cybersecurity," and they go, "Oh yeah, darn, I got a Target credit card. What a mess. What should I do about that?"
Mm-hmm.
Or I got an eBay account. Tell me what I, you know, it goes on and on, because today everyone's being affected, especially by these data breaches. It's just crazy. I mean, I almost, it's just so sad to be able to read the front page. I read the Washington Post, and it's like every other day there's something there about a breach. And I got to say, so I'll talk a little bit about myself for just a second. You know, when I was doing privacy work, I always told the people I was working with, protect the data like it's your data, because it is your data almost always. And I think that's, you know, often we kind of forget that when there's a breach, you know, it's mom, it's dad, it's your brother and your sister and everyone else that are being affected by it. Yeah. So I'll get off my soapbox. I'm just very, very passionate about protecting data.
No, and rightly so, and I'll cover up the numbers, right? But I have a new credit card here that it's in my hands because of a breach, right? And you know, there was a breach, and of course Chase had to reissue a whole. You know, and I wasn't even a part of the breach. This is the crazy thing with this, is I wasn't even a part of the breach, but they just reissued it anyways. So they were like, "You're getting new cards. Don't, you know, just get over it. You're gonna have to change a bunch of things." And so they're being very proactive.
You know, one of my perhaps favorite, although very sad tale, is a couple of years ago I got a letter, and it was from the White House, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. I'm thinking, oh, gee, the president wants to talk to me. No, it wasn't the president. It was the privacy office. Turned out that I had visited the White House a few years ago, and in order to get into the White House, you have to give them your Social Security number. Well, guess what? The hard drive that contained my Social Security number was stolen. So I have this letter. I should frame it. You know, the day that the White House breached.
Apologized.
Yeah, exactly. Crazy.
Yeah. Well, and this makes for a nice segue into, you know, Christian and I, last time we talked 2 weeks ago, Christian was on Home Gadget Geeks, and we kind of caught up a little bit. But the last time we talked about some things that you should and shouldn't do. And, you know, one of the things we mentioned, and I said on the show publicly, my Social Security number is part of the public record at this point, and I have no illusions of privacy. It's out there, right? There's no way it's not, and so I've got to do some things to kind of protect myself, knowing that is in the public realm. It has to be. What could I do to protect myself against that? Christian, you have listed here Privacy and Cybersecurity Part 2. I'm assuming you're referring to Part 2 because we did Part 1 at some other point in time.
Well, yeah, I think the conversation that we had when Dr. Jim Pertolo was on in Show 3 really was the first emerging of talking real privacy topics for, you know, average guy, institutions, etc. So, and I think, you know, what Mark has done in terms of his, you know, career history is very reflective of that. And so I'm very interested to see where they cross over, because Dr. Pertolo is coming from an academic background. Mark is coming from industry and from you know, doing the entrepreneurial and some of the other stuff as of recent. So very interested to see where the crossover is, if, you know, if many of the same ideas overlap, or if there's some points of contention.
Yeah. And Mark, before you get started, as I'm eyeballing this list, this is a pretty average guy. This is an average guy list. This isn't the
exactly
crazy, you know, spooks behind every corner. This is kind of an average guy list. So take a second. Let's walk through this list that you have there and kind of cover these items.
Yeah, sure. And so, look, there's always this issue of protection equals lack of convenience. In other words, the more protection you get, the less convenient. Like if I have to keep all of my my secrets in a vault at the bank, it's probably very well protected in that vault. But if I want to get access to my secrets right now, and it's a Sunday afternoon, I can't get access to them. So there's always that kind of trade-off. And everyone's going to have to figure out what's right for them. And like Jim, your perfect example. I remember a couple of months ago you were talking about LastPass, right? And that was right after the Heartbleed incident that was occurring, and you said, oh yeah, I guess I better get my LastPass, running. And so everyone's going to have to figure out what makes the most.
Mark,
thank goodness.
I did. First time. Everything is captured now. Well, everything I know of.
Yeah, because your Social Security number is probably available in the public library in town, because it's often it shows up very like in mortgage records or property records. It's just
public record.
Assume that it is almost public at this point. So as we're kind of going through the list here, I wanted to offer up some ideas, and some of these are kind of in a little. Christian and I put an order together, but it may sound like they're out of order, but it doesn't matter. They're all things that the average guy can do, and so I'll go through a couple of them. When you register for a website, maybe it's Amazon, it's eBay, it's Pinterest, it's whatever. I'm sure most of us who are listening to the show probably are members or subscribers to dozens, probably 100 different websites, and one piece of advice is don't give them your real email address. And part of the reason for that is that your real email address is almost like your Social Security number, right? Because that's how people identify you. It's and I won't give out anyone's email address here unless it is public, but everyone knows you as such and such at gmail.com. And so the suggestion here is to use a service like Abine, that's A-B-I-N-E, abine.com, and they have a free program called MaskMe, M-A-S-K-M-E, and if you go to abine.com, you look for MaskMe, and it's really simple. What it does is it hides your email address. So when I register for a new account, it gives me an address that's basically a pseudo-random address, and the website, all they know is a pseudo-random email address, but Abine then sends all the email that's supposed to come to me, and they forward it to my actual email address. I also not only use this from a security perspective, but I also like to know who's sending out spam, right? So if I see an email address and I go, oh, didn't I give that address to company X, and now I'm seeing spam to that account? So it's pretty simple to do. Does that make sense there? Getting a kind of fake email address?
Let me ask you, though, how different is that than, say, just, I get 5 or 6 alias accounts when I open up a live account through Microsoft. It allows me to create 5 aliases. What if I have one that's called like spam me not at outlook.com, right? That I created on purpose to use as a spam. Right. How different is using a service like this than having a dedicated email address that you give when you sign up for these guys?
Yeah, Jim, it's very similar. The difference is that once that spam account, well, first of all, if you're just using the address for purposes of just registering and you're never ever going to use it again, who cares what the address is? But if you're going to have a going relationship with an organization, you want to have an address that they can use when they want to communicate to you. So in this case here, it's like the spam address you have, but I could have 100 of them, as basically as many as I want, and I can control each one of them. So if I decide that I no longer want to be a customer of eBay's, I can go into my control panel for the MaskMe and shut it off and say, oh, no more email from eBay, and I'll never see another email.
And so here's where I'm going to move this into a much larger question, right? So I've heard now multiple opinions on both sides of the argument on whether or not IPv6 is in fact more secure. And on one side, I have people who are telling me, well, you have I think if every person was on a planet, they could each have like a quadrillion billion addresses or something like that. So this fact that you are a very small needle in the haystack makes it more secure. Then on the other hand, I have guys telling me, well, if one of those devices does in fact get its IP and does get scanned and does get compromised, because IPv6 is a globally linked solution, you've basically just let them into your whole network with no natting or systems level protection. So the question becomes, at the same level of concern with emails, is there really a justification for this notion where we have a bunch of many small possible addresses that we can turn on and turn off versus, well, we know that this guy is at this address anyway, so why not just filter and do the protection there? And I think when we talk about email addresses as identifiers, the same type of question comes up. Do we really care whether or not someone knows that this address is linked to me? And when we start looking at the big data and the data mining aspects of this, 9 out of 10 times the companies that collect massive amounts of data will say, well, yes, we're collecting all this information about you, but we're anonymizing it. So this really isn't a thing. Let's assume, though, that they're not. And let's assume that they collect all this data and you are, let's just call it the evil Google. Of course, some people think that
that's a fake company, right, Christian?
Right, it's a fake company.
Okay, just wanted to be sure.
Some people think it's not a fake company. I remain neutral right now. But so evil Google collects all of my data, just all of it. Anything that I'm using as a service comes up to them, but I am one of a billion customers that use evil Google. So what's the percent probability that someone at evil Google is going to actually maliciously use my data? Is it conceivable that you can answer that question 1 in a billion? And if so, you've just made the same argument for IPv6, and yet, you have 1 in quadrillion addresses, so you must be secure. But we just said that with the privacy argument, and yet people are like, no, this can't be possible. They want to find you, you're in there. And so, is there really any reconciliation between the two topics? Because they're really it's the same question of what is the level of scale in these issues. It's the same problem.
Wow. So how many hours do we have for this podcast tonight?
Less than 1.
Less than 1. So maybe obviously this is an issue of uniqueness, and whether it's your social security number, it's an IP address, it's any other identifier. I think for purposes, at least perhaps of the average guy show, if someone wants to be able to control their email addresses, turn them on, turn them off, Mask Me is a pretty simple way to do that. And yes, frankly, there probably, we could talk a lot about whether a quadrillion IP addresses is unique enough, or are we just back in the same situation again? We're just fooling ourselves. Is that, Christian? Would that be the way you'd like to end that?
Yeah. Okay. No, I think that's valid.
So maybe after the show, guys, I'll stay up till at least 2 or 3 in the morning. We could talk about this.
I probably won't.
Okay. So you want me to go on with a couple other things here?
Yeah, I want to hear the other stuff too.
So this one I'm going to make really simple, and that is just everyone should be aware that when they use Facebook, when they use LinkedIn, their privacy settings, and you could control if you want to be more anonymous or less anonymous. Again, this is one of those things we could spend probably an hour talking about the various controls. Be aware that they're there, and check them out. Make sure that it meets it with your comfort level. What is it that you want to expose privately to your friends and what do you want to expose publicly to everyone else?
Mark, a few recommended settings in there. I know we don't want to go through them all.
Nah,
but...
I'm not even going to attempt
Okay.
on that one, but because it frankly, so for example, LinkedIn, if you're a job seeker, you're a recruiter, Jim, so you're trying to find out information about your prospective employees. If their privacy settings are set so high that you can't find anything out about them, then it doesn't serve their purpose if they're looking for employment. It's it's funny because I teach a LinkedIn class every week, and occasionally I'll have someone who comes in from the, let's call it, the intelligence community, and they'll say something like, well, we're not allowed to use LinkedIn. It's kind of interesting to see how things are evolving in the world of social media.
Mm-hmm.
And this kind of piggybacking off the whole privacy aspect, how do you feel when you look, you get that weekly feed from LinkedIn and it's, these people have viewed your profile. How do you feel when it's like 6 anonymous people viewed your profile?
Yeah, exactly.
To me, that's almost as much upset as it is. It's like, oh, I want to know who are these. I mean, to me, I have some level of care. Like, okay, either this is their default setting, or they really took the time to go incognito window and look at my profile anonymously because they don't want to know. But then I sit here and think, well, gee, I do the same thing all the time. If I don't want someone to see that I looked at their profile, I just open up an incognito window and hit it. So it's bizarre that it's always a two-sided coin, and you're like, yes, we want to be anonymous. And so I made the decision with my LinkedIn. It's a public-facing website. If people don't know enough about what I'm doing in industry by now, they're not going to get much more or less from LinkedIn. So if I visit someone's profile, it'll show my name. Yeah, they know I work here and there, but I mean, I don't really care at this point. People know what I'm doing, at least at this juncture in my life. So it's, for me, I'd rather not have be pinging up anonymous on other people's profiles because I find it annoying. At least tell me what company you're from, right? But I don't always get that. So.
Well, all right, I'll say one more thing about like LinkedIn. They ask for a bunch of information when you first go through registration. One of them is your birthday. Now, it's okay if they're using the birthday because they want to use it as an identifier. By the way, I should mention that when a website asks me for my birthday, on January 1st, if I go to a website that asks for my birthday, guess what? My birthday is January 1. Oh, it's now the 3rd of January, and I'm going to a website and they want to know my birthday. It's January 3rd. So my birthday is 365 days of the year, and I kind of figure it this way: if an identity thief was to steal information from a website, they have a 1 in 360 chance of getting the right birthday. So just my little tip there. And I'm sorry, I should have ended up with saying that if LinkedIn asks you for your birth date, you expect that they're going to send you a birthday card, right? Why make that public information? It doesn't serve anyone's purpose. So I advise people not to do that. But we could move on to so many other topics if that seems like the right thing to do.
Move on. We have fake email addresses. We talked a little bit about that on the registration side. Talk about no banking on mobile devices.
Yeah, so, okay. Let's talk about mobile devices just for a second here, especially Google. So the Android operating system. Here's a quiz question for you guys. So when the Android operating system was created, do you think it was built with enterprise security in mind?
No.
No. What do you think the impetus for Android OS was?
Usability, UI, scale to the masses.
How about showing ads and selling applications? That's really where it came from. That's the genesis of it. And over time, both Apple and Android, Google have developed additional mechanisms to make their both iOS and Android more secure. But that's where it came from. And then you take this OS that it was not designed from day one with security in mind. And then you give it to a manufacturer, to Motorola, to LG, to Samsung, and then they throw in some additional software. Right, so I had a Samsung S3 recently, and Samsung was really nice because they gave me the Samsung Music Player, and they gave me the Samsung Wallet and the Samsung Maps, right? And I couldn't get rid of them unless I wanted to root the phone, which is something for another discussion because that's probably not the safest thing from a cybersecurity perspective. So I got all these applications that came from the manufacturer, and they're constantly getting updated. And who knows who wrote those for Samsung or LG or anyone else. And the next step is I go to the Verizon wireless store, and those kind people at Verizon, what are they doing? They're adding in their stuff, the NASCAR application, NFL. Their music player, their maps, their whatever. And so frankly, by the time it ends up in my pocket, I've got an insecure operating system with applications that are added by the manufacturer, applications added by the wireless carrier, and then, I'm going to now go out and get Angry Birds. And you guys have Angry Birds on your phones?
No. I don't.
Jim? Your kids, I bet, have it.
Nope. Oh, no, not for any reason. We just never went that way.
All right. Is anyone Angry Birds is one of the best sellers? Anyone know where Angry Birds is? That a U.S. company?
I believe so. Yes, I think it was a startup in California, maybe.
Well, unless we've now taken over Finland, which is possible. Things happen quickly. It's a Finnish company called Roxio, and my point is that even us who are, we know pretty much what we're doing. Well, I hope the three of us are smart people. Obviously, otherwise we wouldn't be on the show. But an application gets added onto your phone. You don't even know who it came from. I mean, at least on your computer, right? If Angry Birds was a pop-up on your computer one day, and they said, "Hey, would you like to play this kind of cool game on your Windows PC?" You go, what? You never would install it, but yet on our mobile devices, we'll install anything. And you don't know who the publisher is. What was it? Nappy Birds was a takeoff on Angry Birds. It was written by like a 20-year-old developer, and by the way, I love the young people write great software. I mean, I don't mean to pick on a 20-year-old developer, but he was a gentleman from Vietnam. Who knew what was in that application, right? Is there something that may steal various your banking credentials? I don't know. So it's a long way of saying I'm a little nervous about anything that goes on with my cell phone. So I'd rather not do anything secure.
Yeah, and let me say, Mark, I think that's a reasonable request, right? I mean, I think there's some people who are like, well, what do you mean? I want to check my banking stuff. I think it is one of those things. It's like you have to ask the question, how safe do you feel with that? And all those points are super valid. I mean, it is right now. They get vetted, but we don't know how much. There's security on the phones. We don't know how well those work. And so it is. And as you're saying that, I'm thinking, I don't do a lot of banking on my phone. For me, my bank is where I work, so I can just walk in, and I do that a lot.
Oh, we're jealous.
But yeah, I have a credit union right there at Gallup. So, but that being said, we push online services and such like that, and so I think it's reasonable to think through, and especially what you just said about we just install everything. That's a reasonable request. So I think people have to really think through. What are they? I mean, I think Android's to the point now where it's more secure than it's ever been, but you really want to, before you go do that stuff, you want to think through, hey, what have I done with this phone? I personally would not be as worried about Samsung apps and some of those other apps because those are companies with big pockets and a lot of liability.
Yeah, and hey, Christian.
Yeah.
Should we ask Jim about OpenSSL and all of the big companies that were using OpenSSL?
Sure.
Well,
Yeah.
but I would say that's different because that is open source software that is contributed to by the community,
Mhm.
not necessarily an app created by, not Samsung is creating a music app. I would not be as worried about them trying to track my personal PII or whatever
Mhm.
information that's in there as I would about other things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so we're talking actually kind of two issues here. One is the privacy aspect about your information ending up in places you weren't expecting it,
Right.
and then the second piece is it secure, right? Can a bad guy come in and steal that?
Right. Right.
So my point is just look, be careful on mobile devices. I love them. I mean, I'm like everyone else. I use them all day long. I get in the car and the first thing I'm doing is turning the GPS on, even if I'm going out to get some milk or something. But just be aware that you're installing software that you don't know who it came from. So you wouldn't do that on your PC, right? It's if Angry Birds suddenly showed up on your PC and said install me, you'd go, huh? No way.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I don't disagree. Christian, you
Right.
want to add anything to that?
Yeah, well, I think the encryption standards too are really changing. The actual percent probability that encryption standards aren't as secure as we think has actually, I think, gone up and changed in a lot. I mean, really, we saw a couple of years ago, well, not a couple of years ago, probably in this year, last year, the RSA had some serious problems, which, I mean, gosh, some of the top companies that are dealing with sensitive information all have those little RSA fobs. Well, who knows how secure those ever were. OpenSSL, again, used by almost 40% of people who implement SSL, which was thought to be impenetrable, right? Well, I guess it is when properly implemented, but I rest. But then we also see companies like TrueCrypt, or not even a company, it was a software called TrueCrypt, and TrueCrypt is the most interesting of all of these because the software was written and published anonymously and put up on a website, and no one really knew they could trust it until everyone kind of was like, yeah, this is pretty good. There's no real agenda here. It's out there. It's anonymized. I don't remember if it's open source. It might have been.
It uses open source as its foundation. I'm not sure it's open source itself. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, the point was that a lot of people put trust into this thing, and then it was like all of a sudden a month ago, a little notice on their website that was like, well, we're really not sure if this is as secure as we thought it was, so we're just going to kind of put things on pause, and no one really knows if they got pressured into, the government or someone else came by and said, hey, we need to figure out how to get into this, and you're not telling us, and we don't know, so something has to change here. Or if the algorithm really did have a nasty hole in it, and these guys were like, okay, the whole point of us putting this up here was a anonymous, secure encryption algorithm, and now it's just, somewhere the bits didn't add up, right? So it's like, what encryption at this point do we actually really trust? I think for the average kind of botnet or punk cybersecurity person who doesn't really know what they're doing, the punk black hat, right? Yeah, it's going to protect from the plain text sniffing and the open access point kind of stuff. But I mean, look at wireless encryption standards. Look how that changed real quick. When wireless came out, WEP 128 was going to be the black wall that no one got into. And now, one of the guys in the ACES program showed our students on a Saturday that WEP can be cracked in about, I don't know, less than a microsecond, right? And we did that demo, and everyone got their Wi-Fi cards out, and there it was. Then they came back and said, oh no, we have it for you now. Try and get through WPA2. And, well, guess what? In the last couple months, WPA2, no more. Certainly, the magnitude at which you can breach WPA2 is nothing like it is with WEP, but still, I mean, it happened, right? The caveat to that being, once you get into the enterprise WPA2, where there's a radius server and some other authentication things going on, the fact that the encryption isn't all up to snuff isn't, isn't exactly as big of an issue. But the point is that cryptography, which everyone thought was somewhat, had made progress, is really pretty vulnerable at this point. Actually, the Maryland Cybersecurity Center recently just published one of their promotional videos, and really, we do have some excellent faculty looking at next generation cryptography for the cloud compute environment, and and they do provide a very compelling justification for some of their research for how we've addressed some of these things. But it really is like, until it's out there and you get people hitting it, you don't know. And it's a cipher, right? At some point, you put enough compute power against it, and someone really wants to go out there and get you, they're going to get it. So it's again, we reduce the. I think cryptography is much more the area where we reduce a surface area almost to a very small probability, but the probability is still there.
Okay, so we're going off script a little bit, and I love this. I hope it's okay as we continue on here. If the People's Liberation Army in China wants to get access to your data because it has value, it really doesn't matter what you're going to do to protect it. They're going to get access. They have practically unlimited resources. You can't get enough resources in most organizations unless perhaps you're the federal government. So this is a tough conundrum that all of us face. Perhaps this is a conversation that above the average guy, but at least understand that a lot of things that we thought were safe are now being scrutinized, and we're coming back and go, oh, wait a second, we got to think and make sure that we pay attention to what we're doing as the average guy, which will lead me into the next piece about LastPass. I love LastPass. I really love LastPass. And I know, Jim, I've heard the show where you had some folks, you had Amber from LastPass on, and Amber was shaming you into getting all of your passwords set up with LastPass.
I admitted, every time I have her on, I get, I got guilted into doing that, and then I never get around to it. And I had some in there. I wasn't using it completely. And actually, the reason I wasn't using it is because I couldn't get it to work at work and on my work laptop. That has recently changed, and so some things have opened up that allow that plugin to work, and so now I'm fully on board with LastPass. And it's interesting with that. I begin collecting. I'm starting to find accounts in places where, like, you go to the screen and it doesn't auto-populate. You're like, oh, another account that I have that I need to add to LastPass. And so we're back on. We'll actually have Amber back on Home Gadget Geeks, I think 3 or 4 weeks. She's going to come back.
Oh, great. Okay.
Specifically about Heartbleed and what it did for LastPass, because they had to just go like gangbusters.
Oh yeah, they have that pretty cool feature, and I'll let Amber obviously talk about that. But the one thing about LastPass that didn't get talked about previously, and I think deserves a mention, is in the world of cyber. Again, I talked about convenience a little earlier. The trade between convenience and more security. So for me, I've made the decision that I'm going to use LastPass to store my passwords, but I want to have more than just a 16-digit random number, alphabet, characters. I mean, it's just full of stuff that the friends that are close to Christian in College Park, just a little north of there, they have a nice big agency. They would have a little bit of a time trying to figure out my my LastPass password, although I hope they don't take this as a challenge. But nonetheless, when I do log in with LastPass, LastPass comes back and it has a feature called multi-factor authentication, also known as two-factor authentication. So it's something I know, which would be my LastPass password, and something I am or something I have. And in this case, it's something that I have, which would be my phone. So I log in with that long password and LastPass. LastPass then comes back and says, hey, you need to go to your phone and log into the phone and use a second factor here, which means I go to the phone and I go put my password in and click a button that says, yes, it's okay now to get access to my LastPass account. So you got to know those two factors in order to get that information. And I highly recommend that, Jim, you're going to be our guinea pig to see how easy this is.
Yeah.
It works for me. It works so well. I'm just so used to doing it. It doesn't bother me. My phone is with me, almost all day long, so it's pretty simple.
Yeah, and I've turned on two-factor for Google and for Twitter,
Yep.
which seems odd that you'd have it, but I just recently turned that on for those two individuals. It is, I have to admit, it is a little bit annoying at times. I'll be in a hurry, and I'll have logged out. I change PCs about 3 times a day, just in various locations. I'm logging in the studio. I'm on my laptop. I might have a separate whatever that I'm using. And so those as soon as they just log me out, right, then I have to re-authenticate again. And so it can get a little bit, and it's like sometimes I've left my phone down on the desk downstairs, and so it gets to be, but it's the right thing to do. That's, I always go, ugh,
yeah, I know,
whatever, and then I'm like, okay, but it's the right thing to do. So one of the things I haven't done, and I'm actually going to do right now as we go through this, is I left two-factor off when I first set up my LastPass the last time to get everything in there. And I left it off just so I wouldn't, because I was going to be doing a lot of LastPass work, and I didn't want to have to mess with it. Now that I'm, not having to access it so much that way, I think I'm going to turn it on. So that was a good reminder to go out there and turn that piece on.
I love to guilt you into doing this.
That's all right.
And actually, LastPass has got like 4 or 5 different ways to do multi-factor. There's a couple of different ways on the phone. I have something called a YubiKey, which is a USB keyboard. And it sounds kind of crazy, but basically what it does is and I didn't bring it with me, so I have to describe it. It's a thing about the size of my thumb, and you plug it into a USB port, and when I plug it in, it has a 16-digit identifier that's unique to that particular one. And every time I press a little button on the top of it, it creates a pseudo-random number which gets connected to a server someplace, and it says, oh yeah, that YubiKey with a unique number, its pseudo-random number that just popped up should be 73324, and that's my secondary authentication. It's another way to use LastPass. They got a couple of other ways to do it. It just get used to it, because that's going to be the way of the future until we could get rid of passwords altogether. And that is why I'm going to people like Christian at University of Maryland Cybersecurity Honors Program, because he's going to be the first guy to figure out how to get rid of passwords. Right, Christian?
Absolutely.
All right. And I will come and work for Christian, because he is going to solve that problem.
Yeah, and it's funny too, because we were also talking about Social Security numbers and the fact that we trust 9 digits, which 5 or 6 of them are your area of living, and zip code, or I don't know.
We were born.
Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, the initial numbers or digits in the Social Security number refer to where you were born and when you were born.
Right.
So the uniqueness is actually sort of the last 5 or 6 digits of it.
Yeah, and it's like it's almost worse. It is worse than web encryption. So what does that tell you? But I'm actually looking to do more research on the new identification system that India has implemented, where they all have some high-tech government IDs that has basically leveled off the fraud rate in a way that we have clearly not been able to put 2 and 2 together yet. And it really just makes me wonder how much of this stuff is kind of fabricated, if you think about it. I mean, honestly, it's a combination of the technology came way too fast. So we as corporate America, as cyber and technology enthusiasts, we didn't care for nothing about securing our applications. All we cared about is that it ran fast, it made our customers happy, and it had the features. And security was like an afterthought, and especially when we weren't really, the Internet of Things had not really emerged yet, and we had not created the level of interconnectivity that is now here. You know, we ramped up like this with the application and in code development, and we just stayed like this with security. And now that this has kind of come to bite us in bad places, we're now kind of like, yeah, the technology is sloping upward, but we're attributing a significant number of our brain cells to going back to those older things and trying to, you know, it's like plugging holes in a leaky faucet. You know, it's now a question of, and this was one of the big takeaways from what the gentleman said at Mach 37. It's who's going to be the guy that we've gotten into so many complex subdisciplines of cybersecurity and the things that are doing it. What is the one idea going to be that's going to make it simple again? And that's really, it's going to be a kind of a P equals NP problem for cybersecurity. And I think that we have a ways to go to get there yet, just because the business requirements are so different across the level for security. But yeah, things like passwords should start to phase out. Things like social security numbers should not exist. Mm-hmm. Applications like Target storing our actual numbers and pins and other data that need not be there should be gone. And this actually gets into, I'm sorry, I'm going to hijack our list a little bit.
Go for it. You're on a roll here, Christian.
You know, this gets into this whole notion of encrypted currency, which everyone is afraid of right now.
Oh, and Bitcoin.
Yes, Bitcoin, Dogecoin, whatever coin prefix you want to put in front of it. The notion of encrypted currency, no one knows what to do with, because look at, you know, how do banks and other financial institutions, do they acknowledge that encrypted currency is a thing? Do they try and support it? What happens if everyone starts speculating off of virtual encrypted currency and that currency crashes after everyone's moved to it? Then what? But really just the notion of, are we actually safe and comfortable with going anonymous about where our money is going? And honestly, people are, it's a very interesting dynamic. I think people who I would have expected to outright say, no, this is ludicrous, are actually giving it serious thought, because they know it's the way of the future. They know the notion of paper currency is really kind of quaint at this point. But you know, some of the things that we've done to launch these currencies, so Bitcoin mining, which is you get a bunch of super high-powered computers together to help run the actual transaction that makes the currency encrypted, right? So it's
you're making your own money.
Right, and it's like, well, how are you doing that, right? And basically, in order to make the transaction anonymous and to do it encrypted, just kind of like how BitTorrent is peer-to-peer, right? And everyone is helping you download a little piece of that file. Well, in Bitcoin or an encrypted currency, everyone is helping you encrypt that little bit of the transaction that's going through the marketplace, right? And so, you know, it's like, this is an advanced technology, and if we implement these kinds of solutions with the internet, with our financing sector, 99% of the problems of the data breaches and the financial breaches we've had are eliminated under this system. Now, that's not to say that new things might not emerge once we start going to these systems, but I think there's a twofold coin of people acknowledge that these are the advanced technologies that fix these problems, but I don't know if everyone is actually comfortable with letting go into this world where everything is kind of it's an anonymous third-party internet gentleman who's doing all your transactions. I honestly don't know if people can think that way. And I certainly think it's going to take another kind of generation for us to get there, but I think it's going to happen. We're also seeing that the internet itself, which is really very systems based, where there's a gatekeeper, right? Everything is a gateway, everything's behind a router, protocol communication establishes, and then you send back a response saying, yes, I'm here, and then a packet comes this way. There are now things that are basically applying the principles of Bitcoin to the internet, where everything is an encrypted, almost like we are the Borg. The Borg is now coming to the internet, where every little device is a piece of this collective encrypted internet brain, where all the transactions of data, knowledge sharing and storage happens in a kind of ubiquitous level playing field, where there's no gatekeeper and you're not, entering one kingdom and leaving another. And so it will be interesting to see how far we go into that model, and if there's a cutting point, if there's a point where we say, no, we still need gatekeepers here, here, and here, but the rest can be an anonymous pool. And I think that these technologies are going to change a lot of these conversations that we're having. I certainly also wonder, and that's one of the cool things about things like Bitcoin, is that they purposely did a growth decay so that by the time the technology matured, people would no longer make money off of the transactions, because the theory, I guess, would be that, and don't quote me on this because I haven't validated this yet, but the theory being that you would have so many transaction systems available in this ubiquitous thing where there's really no financial incentive anymore. But when Bitcoin started, it's like you get, here's X amount of, when your computer solves a particular code, right, on the CPU, you get like, I think it's 10 to the negative 9 Bitcoins, right? One Bitcoin right now goes for about, give or take, $640. And and they basically did a growth decay of 1/2, so just like bacteria decays at 1/2 rates, they're doing the same thing with the transaction reward you get for solving a code, so that eventually you're pretty much making no money 10 years from now doing these transactions. So that's a whole nother space that we have not even breached into, but it makes all these conversations seem like child's play, like, oh, what is a password? Why are we doing that? But again, I think the much larger question is: are people we're so double coined on these issues. We love to say that I want my identity protected, I want to be anonymous, and then it's like, well, we will give you this anonymous pool where you know no one, and it's like, well, wait a second. The whole point of the internet is that we're supposed to be able to communicate with people, and preferably communicate with people that we know. And I think people get very mixed between, my financial business, my data business, my business. I want to know who I'm doing business with, and there are double standards that I think we're in this kind of middle play. And I'd love to get someone like Vint Cerf, who built the gatekeeper model when the internet was first come up. I can't wait to ask him, what do you think of this stuff? Is this something that if you had saw this 30 years ago, you would have picked this over this? And if you had to do it all over again now? So those are questions I'm eagerly looking to get answers to soon, and start debates on that, because that opens up a new space for why does all of this matter?
Jim, I think, does the Average Guy Network provide breakfast for the guests on the podcast?
No.
Christian and I could go for another, it's 9:20 here on the East Coast. We can just go on and on. We'll have breakfast on the show tomorrow.
Well, the good news is that we have more than enough material to come back and to do another show. The good news is we're always looking for stuff to do. I do want to be careful that we don't go too long, because folks kind of start tuning out, and there's a lot of good information. So, So Christian, I'm gonna see if this is a good spot for us to break. We can reschedule Mark to come back on and cover some more. It's not like that information is going to change in the next couple weeks, months as we go along the line there. So are you all right with that?
Yeah, because I do want to get into some of the data disaster resiliency, those topics. Believe it or not, Mark is the first person that made me realize, oh, this does actually fall into these topics. They're relevant. I also want to well, we're gonna line up some guests shortly. I gotta work on that, but I want to bring some of these topics back to the big data side too, because there's some very relevant things happening there right now. So I have a lot of people who can give some good talks on these things that I've just brought up. I want to see if I can find some folks in the data science side that can match the topics and see if we can find a middle point.
So Mark, will you come back?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. Maybe I could jump off with something to ponder for a moment.
Yeah.
Since we're talking cybersecurity, and I'll do a little plug here. I just wrote an article a couple of weeks ago for Dark Reading Magazine with a friend of mine who's a professor at a very esteemed university on the right side of the Potomac River, not the University of Maryland side. He's at George Mason University. And the article in Dark Reading was called Cybersecurity Myths. Actually, it was called Slaying Cybersecurity Myths. And here's the thing to ponder for a moment, because I think we've kind of talked about this in a very roundabout way, but I want to kind of bring it back to the average guy. If you're a bad guy and you want to do something, you want to do some damage, you want to infiltrate a system, you want to exfiltrate data, take data out of something. Today, if you're a bad guy, it takes you a very little amount of time. We've seen studies where you put a computer on the internet and it's unprotected, it's not behind a firewall, it's on the public internet, and within minutes, it's taken over by bad guys. And not only do they take it over so quickly, but it costs them about zero, right? I mean, we could do a whole show about the economics of malware, and I know that Christian's doing a lot of that at University of Maryland. But the bad guys are doing things fast, and they're doing it at just about zero cost. Now, look at the other side of the equation where the three of us are. We're good guys, and we are in the wrong side because the wrong side of the equation is what I meant, because if you're a good guy and you want to detect something on your system, it could take hours, days, years. I work for a company called Nortel, and Nortel had malware in its systems for over 10 years. Now, it is perhaps just a coincidence that Nortel went bankrupt slightly after that malware was detected. But the point is, it stays there for a long, long period of time. And it takes the good guys a lot of resources to find it and mitigate it, to get rid of it. So that equation, good guys, long time, hard to do, expensive. Bad guys, quick and very little effort. We're on the wrong side of that equation, and it's people like us who are doing cybersecurity have got to figure out ways to turn that around, and then we're all going to feel a lot more safer. So I think that's sort of my parting comments.
Yeah, I think it's a good one.
And my parting comment will be that I naively forgot to include in my previous conversation that today the Canadian Supreme Court rules that internet
anonymity.
Thank you.
Anonymity.
I feel like saying nemony or anemone or any of the variations of, but they found that being on the internet anonymously is the key to privacy, and they are pretty much have said that you need a warrant to actually find out who the account holder is of an IP address at an ISP, which again supports this notion of there are some governments, Canada, our dear friends, who are actually would probably subscribe to this notion of an encrypted Bitcoin-like internet. So interesting to see.
Let me say one more thing, because it's such a pleasure to talk with you guys. And I forgot early in this conversation to thank you for all you've done for the community and I have a home server 2011, and I really got to thank Christian especially for pushing me to installing Windows Server Essentials 2012 in my house. I was really scared of that, and listening to Christian, I said I'm going to do it. You gave me the confidence, and thanks to you guys, I'm now running 2012 R2. I got a Synology box. I mean, we could talk about disaster recovery and resiliency at another time, but I wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to leave this program without giving the two of you and Dave and all the others who participated in this big community thank you for helping guys like me.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's good to be part of it. I lean on the irony in this is I'm the average guy in all this, and a lot of you guys are the above average guys in these conversations. It's just my job to facilitate these conversations. That's, I realized 3-4 years ago that if I was going to get any smarter, I needed to hang out with smarter people. And so really these podcasts are an exercise in tracking down as many smart people as I can and giving them an opportunity to speak for a few minutes so that I too can get smarter. And I think about the differences, the listeners. Christian, we just talked about that a week ago. Christian, I know Christian because we started podcasting, and it's one of those cycles that just starts happening. And that reminds me, Christian, I need to pull that segment out so we can put it on Dave Jackson's show because of my podcast. That little section we did last week. But
yeah.
Mark, it's great to have you in the community. I appreciate you saying those things. We get on here, we get on the microphone week in, week out, track down guests, try and provide great content for you guys. And it's always just nice to hear back from the listeners, to say, oh, great. Because sometimes you don't know if you're talking to anybody. You're like, is anybody even listening to this?
Isn't this the time now to talk about the Amazon referral page, Jim?
Yeah, no, we don't do that on the show.
No, you guys are great, and this has just been so much fun.
Yeah,
and I hope you invite me back and to talk about so many other things. This is a conversation that is not going to end for a long time. And look, frankly, I'd rather be solving world hunger than having to deal with cybersecurity problems. But that's the state of the world, is that we have them, and then we got to deal with them. Otherwise, there's going to be some serious consequences.
You bet. Well, maybe we'll do both in the process.
Okay. You can multitask.
Yeah, we'll try and get them. We'll try and get them both done. At the same time, my daughter was down here looking for my keys, and I don't know where they're at. That's physical security, right? I don't even have control of my car keys.
You don't have virtual keys in your house?
I don't. No, not yet. No, or I don't have a password to get my keys. One of the two. Christian, any final things before I wrap this up?
No, it's great to have both of you come out tonight, and of course we'll be back on June 27th.
It's like the 27th. Although as I look at that date, as I think of that in my mind, I think, man, I know I've got something planned. So we'll just take a look. The goal, like I said, will be every other Friday, every second and fourth Friday of the month. That's kind of what our thoughts are on this. Twice a month, get them done second and fourth Friday of every month, and then you can start counting on that. Hopefully, I'll clear out some space and try and make that work on my schedule, and we'll be back. We'll shoot for the 27th. If not, we might do a Saturday show, so we'll just kind of keep you posted as we go forward. Mark, watch your email box, because
I will do that. Jim, you've got
an invite to come back.
You got to hoist up your Christmas glass
oh yeah,
end the show, and there it is.
The standard. This is my standard. All year long. This is part of the podcast community here at theaverageguy.tv. We'll be back in a couple weeks with Cyber Frontiers. Don't forget, we've got Home Gadget Geeks. If you made it to Cyber Frontiers and you're like, oh, I'd like some more tech talk, we do Home Gadget Geeks every Thursday night, 8 p.m. Central 9 Eastern, out at theaverageguy.tv/live. And there's a whole host of communities on the Geeks Network, so thegeeksnetwork.com, and we got a lot of stuff going on. We'll wrap this up for now. You guys stay around for a minute, and we'll be back in a couple weeks. Thanks for listening, everybody.